Despite being the 13th wide receiver taken in the 2020 NFL Draft, Denzel Mims was still a second-round pick and the projected future star wide receiver of the New York Jets. After a star-studded career at Baylor, scouts were calling him the next Josh Gordon. As we flash forward 3 years, Denzel Mims has arguably had the most disappointing career of any of those top-tier receivers in that year's draft. Mims has struggled to get on the field, struggled to produce, and has just not been a good fit with the Jets. In today's video, we're going to take a look at Denzel Mims' career, go through how this little-known recruit became a big deal in the first place, and talk about what has happened to his NFL career and why he could be on the comeback still. But before we get started, if you enjoy college football content, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player I can cover in my next one. Now let's get started and talk about what happened to Denzel Mims. So in order to understand what has happened to Mims, we first need to go back in time. He grew up in Daingerfield, Texas, which is a tiny town in the eastern part of the state, and his graduating class had a total of 97 students. His chances of becoming a college football star, yet alone an NFL player, were extremely low. Except, his grandmother was there from afar to help him get there. His grandmother was never far away, and she actually took a job at his high school as a cafeteria worker to make sure he got second helpings. She said, quote, thirds if he needed it. At the time, Denzel may have found it annoying, but in retrospect, he definitely appreciated it. He said, quote, she made sure I was in line, made sure I was doing the right thing, made sure I had my grades up, and made sure I was being very respectful. In middle school, Mims was one of the best athletes in the area, so he was actually the future projected quarterback of their high school. Except, one night everything would change. In need of a late score, the skinny freshman quarterback was thrown in with the Wolves, and on the last play of the game, they decided to put in their backup quarterback and line up Denzel at receiver. His head coach said, quote, we threw a little slant to Mims, and he went 80 yards for a touchdown. I looked at my offensive coordinator and said he's going to play receiver from now on. Despite his high school having multiple state titles and a proud tradition, it was very easy to overlook kids from there. Despite recruiters looking everywhere, you can still easily miss a kid, and one coach even said, quote, you can drive right by that high school trying to get to Longview High School. Basically, he was saying that high school was overlooked a lot. Mims was also a late bloomer, and would eventually catch college recruiters' attention with his speedy track times. It did take some digging to find him, but one Power 5 school did, and they made him a priority. He moved to receiver and defensive back as a junior there, and would actually battle it out many times with future first-round corner Jeff Gladney. At the time, his coaches actually thought he was NFL good, but he was only listed as a 3-star recruit. He put up pretty decent numbers, as he caught 39 passes for 682 yards and 6 touchdowns, and on defense also had 24 tackles, 4 picks, and had 2 touchdowns as a defensive back. But where would he go, and how would his recruitment take off? Well, it all started one day in May. This was May of his junior year, as he ran a blazing 200-meter dash in just 21.3 seconds. This won the Class 3A state championship, and just a few days later, Texas Tech was the first school to offer him. Arkansas State, Tulsa, and Texas State also followed pretty quickly after that. And then along the way, Baylor assistant coach Randy Clements had also gotten word of this. They had found out about this tall, lanky, athletic kid from that area who was, quote, a late bloomer. They said that the staff looked at his track times, but he wasn't flashy on the field until deeper in the postseason. They realized he was only running as fast as he needed to, so it just took some better competition to push his times better. Eventually, one Baylor satellite camp would change his life, as former Baylor assistant coach Tate Wallace said, quote, he was just completely dominant. He could really run and go get the ball, and nobody could cover him one-on-one. He was just a monster of an athlete. Things changed very quickly for him, as he was offered that Saturday night by the Baylor staff, and by the next afternoon, he was committed to Baylor. Oklahoma apparently did try to come in late, but he was loyal to the Bears and was excited to get to Waco. Baylor truly had a knack for signing explosive wide receivers over the last few years, with guys such as Josh Gordon, Terrence Williams, Corey Coleman, Katie Cannon, and Blake Lynch all choosing the Bears. He ended up choosing them over offers from North Texas, Texas State, Texas Tech, Arkansas State, and Tulsa. He didn't have huge numbers, but was a hidden gem with a lot of untapped potential that could make Art Briles look like a genius if he could put it all together. He was a football, track, basketball, and baseball star, and the sky was going to be the limit for him. Scouts eventually would agree. According to 24/7 Sports, Mims was a 3-star recruit, the number 68 wide receiver, and the 410th best player in the class of 2016. So how would the late bloomer end up doing at Baylor? As a freshman, everything would end up changing for Mims. He had the whole situation go on at Baylor, and he ended up finishing with 4 catches for 24 yards. He decided to stick it out with their interim head coach, and then waited for Matt Rule to come in 2017. Luckily, Rule would end up getting the most out of Mims, as he'd have a breakout season in 2017. While the Bears were absolutely horrible, he He ended up finishing with 61 catches for 1,087 yards and 8 touchdowns. The Bears would only win one game that year, but he had a couple of big games. Against Oklahoma, he caught 11 passes for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. Against Kansas State, he caught 7 passes for 127 yards. In a win against Kansas, he had 5 catches for 122 yards. And then in their loss to Texas Tech, he had 12 catches for 152 yards and a score there. As I said, he had a breakout redshirt freshman year, but unfortunately 2018 would take a little bit of a step back. Part of that was due to the team getting some better weapons, and part of it was just he wasn't as good. Jalen Hurd ended up becoming the Bears' best receiver, but Mims still had a great season. He had 8 catches for 133 yards and a touchdown in a win over UTSA, once again went off against Oklahoma with 11 catches for 114 yards, and then finished the year with 2 touchdowns and a win over Texas Tech. That win would get them to bowl eligibility, and this was a big deal. They'd end up playing Vanderbilt in the Texas Bowl, and he caught 6 catches for 95 yards to cap off another good season. He finished with 55 catches for 794 yards and 8 scores. In 2019, Mims would skyrocket to the top of the Big 12, and so would Baylor. Led by Charlie Brewer, the Matt Rule effect had fully taken control, and Mims was a huge benefactor of that. In his first 4, he ended up going over 100 receiving yards 3 different times, and had 3 scores in a win over UTSA, and 2 in a win over Iowa State. The Bears also started winning games. While he wasn't as effective, he was their leading receiver against Kansas State and West Virginia, and they also beat Texas Tech and Oklahoma State to start out 8-0. In early November, they'd go on the road against TCU, and this game was absolutely insane. Mims ended up having 2 big touchdowns, and they won in 3 overtimes. He also had a terrific start in their game against Oklahoma, and this was going to determine who won the Big 12. Baylor ended up getting off to a commanding lead, but as we all know, they had one of the biggest choke jobs of the last few years and ended up losing 34-31 after Charlie Brewer threw a late interception. Unfortunately, Baylor's playoff hopes were pretty much done from there, but they did beat Texas and Kansas to close out the season. Then they ended up playing Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. In his final game, he'd catch 5 passes for 75 yards and a touchdown against the Bulldogs to cap off a terrific career. He finished with 66 catches for 1,020 yards and 12 touchdowns, and was one of the top receivers in all of college football. Coming out of Baylor, he was seen as the next Josh Gordon or Courtland Sutton. He was the only player in the NCAA with at least 8 receiving touchdowns in each of his last 3 years, and pretty much he was a surefire boom prospect. Some thought he'd be called in the first round, but there was a stigma that Baylor receivers were only good in their system, but Denzel would insist that Matt Rule's system was different. That's not how it ended up going though. He ended up falling to the second round, where he was eventually taken by the Jets. He said, quote, "I keep the names of the teams that skipped on me, but I don't worry about that anymore. I just don't worry about me going where I went, because I'm thankful for where I went. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm going to keep tabs on who went before me, and I'm just going to put my head down and keep grinding." Unfortunately, this would not age well, just like Josh Rosen's 9 mistakes. In his rookie year, Mims would end up playing in 9 games for the Jets, finishing with 23 catches for 357 yards without a touchdown. It was definitely a disappointing rookie year, but he did show flash at times. In 2021 with Zach Wilson, he was expected to have a breakout season, but it ended up going disastrously. He finished with 8 catches for 133 yards, and once again failed to catch a touchdown pass. It'd get a lot worse though, as the epitome of it all was in 2021 against the Saints. With both Elijah Moore and Corey Davis out with injuries, Mims would end up getting the start, but he was benched after committing back-to-back penalties, which would push the team into field goal range. He was eventually replaced by DJ Montgomery, who had never played in an NFL game before. He ended up having a 34.8% catch rate, which was 3rd most amongst 271 different NFL receivers that year who had at least 20 targets. He was pretty much near the bottom of it all, and he would need to show improvement in 2022. He ended up finishing with 11 catches for 186 yards, and for the 3rd straight year, failed to catch a touchdown pass. So far, after 3 years in the league, Mims has not caught a touchdown, and while he was a 2nd-round pick, he's been very underwhelming for the Jets. So what has ended up going wrong for him? Well, 1, he commits a lot of penalties. 2, he's had poor hands, which is shown by his catch rate. 3, his route running has been exposed. And 4, maybe it's just a system and organization. The Jets have been somewhat of a dumpster fire for quite a long time now, and it seems that they've already moved on to Elijah Moore, and Mims is somewhat becoming an afterthought there. They may not be putting as much time and energy into him as they used to, and right now, I think Mims needs a fresh start. It's been really disappointing to see because he was awesome at Baylor, and I truly thought he was going to pan out at the next level. It's still too early to tell, and he could end up proving everyone wrong this year. But right now, he may not be on an NFL roster much longer if he doesn't have a big 2023 season. But what do you guys think? If you're a Jets or a Baylor fan, what has gone wrong for Denzel Mims, and does he have potential for the future? Also, be sure to let me know another player I can take a look at in my next video. And before you go, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.